Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat podcast. Games are coming thick and fast, but we are here to preview the North London derby. Arsenal take on Tottenham at the Emirates. I nearly said Highbury. At the Emirates, 8 p.m. kickoff on Wednesday evening. This is an opposition preview, so of course we have got Sophie Nicolaou back from the Highbury squad. Sophie, how are you?
Doing good, Chris. Doing okay. Hanging in there. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Just got back from Tamworth. Of course, we got over the line in the end, into the fourth round, and I can't exactly say that for you guys.
What joy you must be feeling.
There you go. The first dig after 90 seconds in.
Well done. 2-footed studs up. Well done, Chris. Yellow card for you. Yeah, I mean, it's not what we wanted. And if I'm going to be honest, I didn't have a really good feeling about the game beforehand. And look, I'm not the type of fan that's going to sit here blaming a kit, especially when the white kit represents something especially important in the cultural scheme of things. But my God, we've been garbage in that white kit in the FA Cup. And, Mikel Arteta has completely failed in the FA Cup since he's won it. And, for a lot of Arsenal fans, and maybe for my generation, Generation X, who still put huge value on the domestic trophies, it's a grand failure. And to lose out, okay, we lost on penalties, but we played that game, an hour with 10 men and just couldn't finish our dinner against a Manchester United team that is probably coming off being one of the worst. Well, it isn't coming off. It is one of the worst Manchester United teams in Premier League history. And of course, cup games are totally different. But we're going to get onto, I'm sure, Arteta and some of the philosophy and stuff, Chris. But it was a really disappointing night.
Sophie, I'm laughing now because I've heard Arsenal fans in the past blame the weather, blame the kit. Of course, Arteta last week was blaming the ball. Before we talk about that, let's hear from Mikel Arteta on the defeat against Manchester United on penalties.
Incredible how you don't win the game. That's basically to sum up the dominance, the superiority in relation to your position, and everything that we did to try to win the game. And that's it. That we didn't deserve. We didn't get what we deserved, clearly. But there is an element that is about putting the ball in the back of the net. They did it once, and with the amount of situations, chances, penalties that we had, we didn't. And we go home extremely sad. But I cannot be prouder of my players on the team, individual, collectively, what they produce. Like on Wednesday against Newcastle, against two top teams, it is incredible. But we haven't got rewarded, and that's the downside to it. But that's the outcome, But obviously, relying on not performing like this and waiting for one shot to go on target and score a goal, I don't want to bet on that. I bet on that team to try to do. Are we going to win big trophies? I don't know. But playing like this, there are very few teams in the world that can play at that level.
Sophie, as per normal, when you're on this channel, I've got so many questions for you. But the first one I suppose I should ask is, Arteta, are you still behind him? Because you go online, and I know it's not always the best place to gauge the whole fan base, but a lot of people seem to be very frustrated again with Arteta.
I am still behind him, and I think he deserves to dig himself out of this adversity. And what are we calling adversity here, right? The adversity, the obvious, is losing to Newcastle at home in a semi-final of a League Cup. 7 draws so far in the Premier League, losing to Manchester United in an FA Cup. And at the same time, right, we're still second in the league. Albeit a good few points behind Liverpool. We are third in the Champions League table. And that League Cup against Newcastle is half-time. It's not over and anything can happen in football. So the adversity, though, the true crux of this, Chris, are two things, I think. One is the fact that Arne Slot has kicked off his Liverpool career almost flawlessly. And yes, he inherited a very healthy team from Jurgen Klopp. The architecture was there. They have at least 4 world-class players, but you still have to manage and win. And coming into that pressurized situation is not easy. C filed under Manchester United, replacing Sir Alex Ferguson. C filed under Arsenal Football Club, replacing Arsene Wenger. And the amount of managers that have been lost at Manchester United since then, when you look at how, I mean, if we'd have put a bet on them not winning the league since he's left, I think people maybe would have called us crazy. You know, for us, it's 21 years. For Liverpool, it was 30 years. Difference for Liverpool, of course, during that time, they won domestic cups, but they also won Champions League, which made up for any failures in the Premier League. So Liverpool's, and I wouldn't say emergence under Slot, but Liverpool kind of just kicking off like Klopp never even left. That's left a little bit of a chip on some Arsenal fans' shoulders. Mikel Arteta inherited a much bigger mess than Arne Slot did. Let's all be honest, right? We were broken. We had no culture. We didn't have much from the fan base in terms of the love for the club. I mean, he's had to rebuild Arsenal 2.0. The other thing I think, Matt, a little bit earlier in the season was Chelsea and Maresca. That I think is comparable. Of course, not in the sense of what Chelsea have spent in the transfer market, Chris, and the plethora of talent that they have available to them to mount a challenge or be competitive, right? But I think that also kind of got under the goat of Arsenal fans. How is Maresca coming in, kicking off, hitting the ground running so early? Yes, they've maybe kind of, you know, not been as good in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but that was getting under Arsenal fans' skin too. The third thing in the adversity column is how we're playing and the style of which we're playing. You and I have spoken a lot over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and one of the things that you feared the most are our attacking players, the flank players, the creativity from Odegaard, the speed of which we play, and that just has completely evaporated this season. So I understand some Arsenal fans being frustrated. I understand some Arsenal fans questioning Mikel Arteta. Is he a closer or is he our Brendan Rodgers? But for me, at this point, considering where we're at in the league, that we're still in the Champions League, maybe better built for the Champions League than the Premier League, to be honest with you, this season, I'm definitely still giving Mikel Arteta the benefit of the doubt.
You sound so much like me, being a positive fan in seeing all of the good things that are there, and I completely agree. What's gone wrong, Sophie, in terms of the last couple of games in the cup competitions, the League Cup semi-final first leg, and of course now out of the FA Cup? Because we'll talk about the Premier League form and the Premier League overall, and as you mentioned, Arsenal are sitting in second, just behind Liverpool, because you've been in really good form in the Premier League. So what's gone wrong in these 2 cup games? Where do you put the blame on these 2 cup games in particular?
Yeah, I know we'll get to the Premier League, and I differ a lot on the form in the Premier League, but the thing we've struggled with overall is we haven't cracked the code on how to play against teams that come at us defensively with a defensive strategy, or as the young kids call it these days, Chris, the low block, right?
You're not going to get that with Tottenham.
Mikel Arteta has, gotten a lot of praise for the style of football that we have been playing. And he's paid big bucks, probably one of the highest paid managers. I think he gets paid more than Diego Simeone, and, one of the highest, if not, I don't know if he gets paid more than Pep, but he's there. It's him and Pep. He gets paid a lot of money, and he hasn't figured out yet how to set up our team when we're playing against teams that just, park the bus. And to be respectful to those teams too, it's not just about parking the bus, it's how they counter when they're in possession and what we do when we're out of possession. And I think that's been our biggest challenge. Not only creatively have we lacked ideas, but we seem to get frustrated. And you'll see, if you look at a heat map, most of our passing is in that centre circle or just off the centre circle. We just don't know how to break down teams. And look, the players are culpable, of course, but a manager has to find a way to break that monotony. And this season, Mikel hasn't. And Newcastle United have beaten us twice now this season. We played them up at theirs in the league and we lost. They came to ours. And, Eddie Howe, you could argue, outcoached Mikel Arteta. Amorim has inherited an absolute garbage Manchester United. And in the game against Liverpool and in the game against us, you could see the tweaks. You could see he's actually made a difference as a manager. And I think why some Arsenal fans are a little bit frustrated is, are they seeing the inches? Are they seeing Mikel Arteta be able to rectify those fine margins and figure out a plan B? And I think that has been our Achilles heel this season, is not being able to figure out those kind of nuances in the game, whether it's in the Cups or in the Premier League, Chris.
Sophie, as a Spurs fan, I can hardly talk about trophies because we haven't won one in almost 17 years now. But I've got to ask this because, of course, it's a preview show and you're on, ahead of this big game. If Arteta doesn't deliver a trophy this season, do you think that's going to be the end of him?
No, not at all. I think the Cronkies believe in Mikel Arteta. We have a certain way of running the club. We're a sustainable project, which will frustrate a lot of Arsenal fans who might be listening to this tonight. I've been a defender of the owners for the last 2 or 3 seasons. I felt like we have some of the better owners in the Premier League. When you see kind of what's happening at Manchester City or Chelsea and Manchester United, I don't see how Arsenal fans could argue. What Arsenal fans want is some want a Roman Abramovich, right? Stick your hands in your pockets and just buy. And as you know, with PSR and the financial playing field, you just can't do that like some other teams used to. And then when you spend 100 million on Declan Rice, some fans think you need to back that up in every position to have that world-class signing in defence and midfield and up front. So I think they believe in him. And a lot of Arsenal fans get really angry at me when I point to how they run their American teams and how they stick by their managers. But, the LA Rams is a perfect example of sticking with a young manager who took them to a Super Bowl, lost an NFC championship, and then in the end went back and won it on their own home turf. And I think they believe in Mikel Arteta the same way they have in Sean McVay at the LA Rams. Eventually, he will deliver them the title. The difference is they've been throwing the kitchen sink at the LA Rams to get to that point, investing in the team. And, some Arsenal fans think they haven't been investing, in our team. But I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's plain to see it's not like we haven't spent any money, Chris. We have, and maybe on occasion we've got it wrong and we haven't bought the right players. So I don't think he gets fired, and that's going to frustrate some fans. But also in the modern day game, be careful what you wish for. You and I have talked about Pochettino. If Tottenham had just believed in him a little bit and let him play out of that funk, would he have would he have been able to recapture what he created? When you look at kind of when Mourinho left Manchester United and said finishing second is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my career, and people laughed at him. But when you look back, he won them 2 trophies and he said that. So I just think sometimes it's easier said than done. Some fans will say, let's get, Mancini or Inzaghi or Ancelotti, and football just doesn't work that way.
Sophie, of course, Arsenal are 2-0 down then. Got to travel to St James's Park. And of course, Spurs are 1-0 up against Liverpool. We've got to travel to Anfield. Very, very difficult place to go, especially for Tottenham. The amount of times I've driven away from Anfield and not got a result, heavy defeats over the years, very disappointing. If you were to predict who's going to be in the final, who do you think is going to be?
I mean, I would love an Arsenal-Tottenham final. That would be amazing. But we've both put ourselves... I say you haven't. You've got the lead, but you are going to Anfield, and I felt that way leaving Anfield many times, Chris. It's a crack that we haven't been able to a code we haven't been able to crack. I mean, right now you would say Liverpool, Newcastle, and maybe that's being a little bit disrespectful to Tottenham considering they have a 1-0 lead, but it's who they're playing and where they're playing, right? So for me, I even think for us, 2-0 going up there, we haven't won there. It's a place that we've struggled. The form we're in, the injuries we have. I mean, I know that game's not until the first week of February, and there's no excuses where I'm coming from. But we'll find out a lot about this Arsenal team if they're able to kind of overcome that and find a way to win. But right now, my heart says Arsenal, Tottenham, but my head says Liverpool, Newcastle.
So if you don't worry about the disrespect, we expect it from Arsenal fans. Don't worry. Before I get your thoughts on Tottenham, let's hear from Ange Postecoglou after our 3-0 win at Tamworth on Sunday.
Yeah, look, firstly, credit to Tamworth. I thought they gave everything. They gave a real good account of themselves. We knew it'd be a challenging afternoon for us. With the surface, making it really difficult for us to sort of play in the manner we wanted to. But I thought it's easy to get frustrated on days like this. But I thought the lads, for the most part, kept their heads really clear and calm, and just sort of persisted and eventually overpowered them.
I saw you when you were walking in. You looked like you were relishing it, walking through the fans and that kind of thing. It's a proper atmosphere.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's the beauty of this tournament. I'm sure all of Tamworth will remember the day, and as they should, because their team did really well, and we remember it too because it's a unique experience for us in terms of the kind of challenge we had today. And I enjoyed it, mate. It was a good day.
Sophie, of course, Tottenham are in all competitions at the moment at this stage of the season, which I see as a real big positive. But of course, we are 12th in the Premier League table. What have you made of Spurs overall this season?
Whenever I see Ange, I always remember that scene from the original Karate Kid where Miyagi's training Daniel-san, and he goes, "Daniel-san, always look at eye, always look at eye." Does he ever look anyone in the eye when he speaks to them? It's insane. I mean, he's always looking down.
Does that bother you? Does that bother you?
It does a little bit, yeah. It's like the clinking of the glasses when people do cheers. In order for it to work, you've got to look them directly in the eye. I'm a skeptical of someone that doesn't look someone directly in the eye. I look away from camera sometimes when I'm speaking, so I might be a hypocrite here. But I don't know. It just comes across as I don't know what it is with Ange lately. He's sounding a little. Maybe he always sounded like that, and just the way he's delivering it, he sounds a little bit downbeat. But you've got to be disappointed being 12th. I mean, this is a Tottenham team that kind of reinvented itself under Pochettino. You found Champions League football. Yes, you're in Europe, but you were challenging for the Premier League as well. And I think if I was a Tottenham fan, I'd be crushed right now sitting in 12th spot, albeit in all 4 competitions. Whether or not you'll win any of those, history has proven lately that might not be the case. I actually picked you to win the FA Cup this year. Tasted like vinegar coming out of my mouth. But I did say that you were due, and I did pick you to win the FA Cup. So, I mean, aren't you disappointed? I know you're in a transition phase too, but it's just a shame that you can't match your defense with what you do in attack. And so that must be a little bit disappointing, right?
Of course, no Spurs fan wants to be sitting 12th in the Premier League in January. Results in the Premier League certainly do need to improve, but not wanting to give excuses here, Sophie, but ever since Ange has come in, the amount of injuries that we have had, a lot of fans have actually blamed the injuries on the way that we set up, the way that we play, the way that we train. And it's interesting because this week, again, Spurs have advertised 3 jobs within our medical department, and they have replaced the medical department a number of times under Ange Postecoglou so far. So there are clearly issues in that department, which they're looking for new staff again. So, but I'll tell you what, when it clicks, we've seen some really, really entertaining football under Postecoglou. It's been really great. And some fans, walk away from the stadium, which we haven't done, under the likes of Conte and Mourinho with the style of football that they play. However, some of the games, it's very, very entertaining for the neutral. And that's where we need to change. It don't need to be entertaining for the neutral. It needs to be entertaining for us, for Spurs fans, because we can concede so many goals. What have you made of Postecoglou's approach? Because how many times have we all heard him say in press conferences, "I'm not going to change"? He's always, made it very, very clear to everybody he is not going to change his way. Do you think he will be a success at Spurs, or do you think he'll be another manager to come to Tottenham and not win a trophy? Because, as I say to you, year in, year out, the amount of years now without a trophy, and it is now nearly 17, which is ridiculous.
I told you before when we spoke, I really want to hate Ange Postecoglou so much.
Yeah.
Being a fellow Greek, I can't hate him, right? And we don't get many kind of, big positions in sports under the spotlight. So and Arsenal fans may not like this, but I don't care. When a Greek person does well, and I still shout about the fact we had George Michael, Little Island of Cyprus gave the world George Michael. And Ange being Greek and kind of flying his culture flag as well, I think has been a good thing. It's always fun when you see the Barighiagi newspaper taking him cakes and things like that. If there's one thing, a lot of people move with the wind these days, Chris, and they'll go wherever the money is, wherever the en vogue kind of cultural situation is. And I think you have to give him some credit by standing by his philosophy and his laurels. Not a lot of people do that these days. Now, you may call that naive. And yeah, of course, in sports, it's about winning and you have to be adaptable. And I think if there's a criticism to be given to Ange is that he's not adaptable. And for Tottenham, it might have worked at Celtic, where it's less challenging. But as you saw in the Champions League with Celtic, he found adversity, and that adaptability factor comes into play when you're on the bigger stage playing against better teams, better players. Yeah. So I think that his approach has been, kind of exciting at the beginning, and he gave something different to the Premier League. But the fact that he's not willing to budge, and like Mikel Arteta, they're both very, very stubborn. It's my way or the highway. Whereas I think world-class managers adapt just to win. It doesn't matter what it takes. I'm going to do what it takes to win. And if that means playing defensively against X team or X teams, I'm going to do that. And we've been finding the same this season with Mikel Arteta, very stubborn in his approach. And you could see, I think, that our players are not enjoying their football this season. And maybe that's something similarly that's happened to Spurs in certain games. You can beat the big teams, you struggle against the small teams, you have small wins here and there, everyone's happy for 2 or 3 days, and then the same thing happens again. And that, I think, is a huge challenge for him.
Sophie, let's talk about Arsenal's season so far in the Premier League. Because as we've already mentioned, Arsenal are sitting in second spot, 40 points from 20 games. We're at the halfway point now of this Premier League season. Who's going to win the Premier League?
I can't believe we're on the same points as Forest. That's just shocking, isn't it?
It's amazing. Nuno Espirito Santo, I tell you, I never thought I'd be seeing that.
I mean, Chris, how do you feel about that? Not to not answer your question, but I mean, is it true? Was Super Kev right all along? Is it really the players?
Wow.
Maybe it is. Isn't that insane?
I think some people just fit in at certain places. I don't think it was ever going to work for Nuno at Tottenham. And it's weird because when you see that Nottingham Forest and fantastic to the, fair play to them. But I remember that last game against Manchester United, the Spurs fans singing, "You don't know what you're doing," because he brought off Lucas Moura, who was no doubt our best player in the game that day. And yeah, it's a weird one. I wish him all the best, but it was never going to work at Tottenham.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Where someone will fit and where they don't. And, will Forest be there at the end of the season? Maybe this is kind of like their 15 minutes of fame, but we kept saying that about Leicester. Can they keep doing this? Can they keep doing this? Yeah. And your club and my club didn't stop them from doing it. And we had every chance to that season, especially you guys. No doubt about that. I mean, your money's on Liverpool, right? But at the same time, who saw City's adversity coming? I mean, that was just shocking. It was like the first time you see Mike Tyson on the deck against Buster Douglas. No one saw that coming. So you've got to hang in there, because they may come into some difficulties. They may get more injuries. They may start losing games. Manchester United have proven like you can get a point off them or play them a certain way. So right now, I mean, my head says Liverpool, my heart will always say Arsenal, but we've also proven over the last 2 seasons when we're leading and when we're only like 2 or 3 points behind, we can't win it. So why would you believe that we could do it this season when we're actually playing worse football? So you've got to go with Liverpool at this point in terms of who's going to win the Premier League.
Results wise, though, Sophie, I hate to say it, but you're doing very well in the Premier League. You know, I've got to say it because it's facts. The results put on screen here. Talk us through some of these games recently in the Premier League, because you know you've got a very good home record. We'll come on to talk about the set pieces. The set pieces have been sensational this season. What is really clicking and what isn't clicking at the moment in the Premier League for you?
Fulham. I can't stand Fulham the last 2 seasons. I mean, that's a team that we just cannot break down. And I don't know what it is, but we seem to play our worst football when we face Fulham. You know, it's funny, isn't it? In the Premier League against Manchester United, totally dominant and won that game, I think, with ease. You play Crystal Palace, who maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago, we were humiliated 3-0 under the lights, weren't able to beat them. And since then, we've been teaching them a lesson with every game that has come. You see that type of Arsenal that plays banging in the goals. Previous to that, the same thing with West Ham. And then we kind of get into these funks. The Everton game, yeah, you could argue a couple of things don't go your way, but Everton have just been terrible, absolutely terrible. And our record against them at Goodison Park hasn't been great, but our record against them at the Emirates has been. And to not be able to score a goal against Everton, you know, that is really frustrating. And Brighton over the years have been a real tough nut for us to crack, but you can't lose. It felt like a loss. You can't let that happen, you know. And some people will argue about the refereeing and the VAR decisions. But what we've done, Chris, is we've given permission to the referees to make some of these decisions. And I'm not one that sits here and complains about, you know, VAR and refs, and that's why we're at where we're at. Sure, we've had decisions go against us. You could argue the Declan Rice red card against Brighton, Trossard kicking the ball away. Don't do it. If you know the rules, don't kick the ball away. Look what happened to your teammate just a week ago. And in the biggest game of our season, you kicked the ball away. Should have won that game against Manchester City. The Saliba thing, don't make that challenge. Why put yourself in that position? And if anything, the head clash, I think, was the one for me that sticks in my goat a little bit, because I felt like, you know, we don't see those decisions given often. That's the one I'm going to pick where I would complain about. But in all of those games, we've had opportunities to score, to win. We have the talent to do it, and we haven't been able to cross the line. So you have to be able to, again, it comes into this overcoming adversity. My biggest beef with Arsenal is, have you mentally grown? Can you close the deal? And we're seeing that as time progresses in certain games, we haven't been able to overcome that hump. We've been mentally strong in certain situations over the last 2 seasons, no doubt about that. But in these moments this season, I think we've allowed those things to affect us. And similarly, how fans can become victim mentality, I feel like maybe that's spilled over to our players just a little bit. And some Arsenal fans may not like hearing that either, but you have to carry on playing the game and capitalize on your opportunities. And we haven't been able to do that.
Sophie, you mentioned Everton there. Spurs travel to Everton, to Goodison Park this coming weekend. And of course, it'll be the last time that we go there before they move into their new stadium for next season. Do you think they're going to stay up?
I picked them to go down at the start of the season. And that pains me, as you know, because, you know, I had a little mini crush on Everton because of Super Kev. But talk about a team that just keeps finding ways to survive. They're probably in better hands with David Moyes than they were with Sean Dyche, because at least with Moyes, you get some type of kind of style. of football. I say that, you know, just a little bit extra than Sean Dyche, but I picked Everton to go down. I think the lucky thing is for a lot of those teams down there this year, Chris, is that Southampton are really bad. Wolves aren't great. Ipswich, if any team you want to survive, it's Ipswich, because they put their best foot forward and they play some really good football. But the only thing that will keep Everton up is if the other teams continue to be as bad as they are.
Yeah, of course. Only a couple of weeks ago, Spurs went to Southampton 5-0 up before half time. That was a good day out. Sophie, talking about the Spurs results, you know, recent results as well. You know, it's been pretty similar all season. To be fair, you don't know what you're going to get as a Spurs fan right now. You don't know what to expect, and it's funny because whenever we do these preview shows, when there's 4 of us on the podcast, we go round each guest getting score predictions, and the last, say, 5 or 6 previews, I have just ended the show and said, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue how this is going to finish, because win, lose, we don't draw many matches, but, you know, look at some of these results recently, you know, losing at home 6-3 against Liverpool. We beat Manchester United in the Cup 4-3, a 4-3 against, you know, at home against Chelsea. And most recently, of course, like we've already spoken about, Tamworth, you know, beating them 3-0 in the FA Cup. How are you feeling ahead of this game at the Emirates on Wednesday?
You know, when you said that, I think of that scene in Forrest Gump. You know, life is like a box of chocolates. You never quite know what you're going to get. And that's
exactly it.
That's Tottenham. That's Tottenham. I mean, that Chelsea game was insane. The Man United game was insane. You still scored 3 goals against Liverpool, which, you know, not many teams have done this season. If you were a little bit more disciplined in defence, and, you know, goes back to that stubbornness of that high line, maybe that result would be a little bit different. And I think that's probably the most frustrating things for Spurs fans is how many games have you lost, you know, utilising that kind of strategic approach. I always say to you when we talk is it's a North London derby. I don't care who's in form. I don't care who's at the top of the table, who's in the middle of the table. It is a North London derby, and both teams are under pressure right now. Ange is under pressure to deliver results. And Mikel Arteta is under pressure because you cannot lose at home to Newcastle. You cannot lose at home to Manchester United. And you certainly don't want to top that up by losing at home to your biggest rivals. I fear for what might happen in the fan base if you guys get a result against us on Wednesday night. That will not be good for Mikel Arteta. That will be seen as pure regression, especially when you look at the results that we've had against you in the North London derby over the last few seasons. So I think there's pressure on both teams. I think that you could hurt us in attack because our defence has not been that great this season. The focus is all on the attack, Chris, and the fact that we're not scoring the same amount of goals as we did last year. And the midfield and the defence have been getting away with it a little bit, in my humble opinion. You know, Saliba is amazing and he's one of the best defenders in the world. Not been great this season in my eyes. Big Gabby has been our best defender. We've had injuries where Thomas Partey's playing right back. Timber's injured again. It might be that Thomas Partey plays right back on Wednesday. The left back issues, the injuries. Calafiori's injured again. Zinchenko's always injured, fell out of favour. But the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly has been a total revelation. I know you've had similarly a few young players emerge this season. It's so refreshing and good to see. The kid is totally unfazed, Chris. So it's going to be an interesting game because I think we're vulnerable right now and you're vulnerable right now. And for the first time in maybe 3 seasons, I'm always nervous, but I'm always confident. But I'm going into this particular North London derby thinking anything can happen.
Like I mentioned to you earlier about going to Anfield and getting very little, I feel like that about Chelsea and Arsenal as well, because we very rarely win away at Chelsea or away at Arsenal. Once in the Premier League at the Emirates. What do you think it is about that fixture and Spurs not winning at the Emirates? Because even back to 92 when the Premier League started, we only won once at Highbury as well. And that win was back in May 93. And of course, you were preparing for a cup final, so you put a reserve team out.
You're good.
That weren't funny.
You know what that boils down to? And I think this has been another thing that we've lacked this season, because we went many seasons without it, even with that record you talked about. Intimidation factor. There's certain teams and there's certain moments, right? Or bogey teams or whatever it is, where I liken this to like Tiger Woods beating any golfer before they've stepped up onto the first tee. The pedigree, the history, the intimidation factor. He just had it all. We've talked a lot with ex-players about how we would beat teams just in the tunnel, just kind of the stature, that intimidation. And I think that's where that comes from, because you've had good teams, and at times in the Pochettino era, better teams than I think there was at least 2 seasons there where you had a better team than us. No doubt about that. But
there was a nice League Cup win at the Emirates. That fantastic goal from Dele Alli. I really enjoyed that evening. Yeah.
I bet you did. Yeah. Not one that I like to reflect on too much. Same like with the one that stands out for me, but that wasn't at ours. That was.
I didn't ask.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So yeah, intimidation for me, and pedigree and history, I think, gets into players' heads.
Sophie, you spoke a little bit about team selection there. Now, the team on the left is the team that you put out against Brighton, and then the one on the right is the team that you put out against Manchester United. What changes do you think are going to happen? Because I was actually quite surprised on how strong you went against Newcastle, and I was surprised on how strong they went against you as well, which was nice to see in a League Cup semi-final, because normally a lot of the teams do make a lot of changes. But what team do you think that Arsenal will be putting out on Wednesday evening against Spurs?
Yeah, I think a lot of Arsenal fans were somewhat surprised because of how Mikel's approached those domestic cups, especially the League Cup. But it's a semi-final and it's an opportunity to go to Wembley. So I think that's why we saw that. You can scratch Gabriel Jesus off that. The guy is so unlucky. Finally comes back into form, finally contributing again. And he has an injury that looks like might keep him out for the rest of the season. It's just heartbreaking for the guy. Jurrien Timber looks like he might be injured. Of course, he's coming back from a massive injury, missed him last season. You could tell like what a beast he is. He's such a good player. We're so much better with him. So Timber, you will not be seeing this week against you, which means that Thomas Partey will probably play right back, which weakens our midfield, because Thomas Partey's kind of been one of our better midfielders this season. I do not see Merino starting. I think he saved Rice's legs a little bit in the cup game against Manchester United. He, for me, has not been great. He is not an elevated signing. He doesn't have an X factor that improves us. Maybe that's a little bit unfair, but he needs to get used to the Premier League pace. We've seen him be good in spurts. Jorginho will he play now? I don't know. It's going to be Odegaard. I think it might be Odegaard, Merino, Rice, Jorginho. His legs and his age will probably be on the bench. I think Lewis Skelly keeps his spot in the left back position. Some Arsenal fans will say, well, why not throw Zinchenko into midfield? Mikel Arteta just doesn't do things like that. I think he'll keep Havertz to get his confidence back after a horrible game against Manchester United last night, and we'll see Gabby go over to the right, and Trossard probably start on the left. Waneri, of course, another young player who's been incredible whenever he's been asked to play this season, injured as well. So we've been suffering from injuries and he's had to tinker. But that, I think, will be the lineup against you on Wednesday night.
I've seen a lot of criticism online for Kai Havertz. Again, what have you made of him?
Firstly, I would like to say that any fans sending family members abhorrent, disgraceful, disgusting, despicable messages, you're not Arsenal fans and you're not football fans. And I wish the social media police would do a better job of this, because nobody deserves that. right?
Yeah.
You had a horrible game of football. Let's talk about him and his performance. Do not involve family members and behave that way. It's subhuman. It's not even human. So I just wanted to say that. He did have a horrible...
Sorry, Sophie. I was gonna say it's so common now. You know, like you say, that they're human beings. They're footballers. Yes, they have bad games. I'm sure that a lot of people have bad days in their jobs. I know that some people's jobs don't mean so much to people because, of course, it is a game of football, and everyone, you know, that is hugely important. But you know, this abuse. Surely the social media channels need to do something about this, don't they?
Yeah. I just don't understand how they haven't. They've got the means to do it. Yeah. You know, we hear Mark Zuckerberg, you know, talking on American television the other day about how, you know, his so-called company was bullied into, you know, taking off certain messaging during the you know, the political campaign or whatever. They've got the power, Chris, to do this. Yeah. I just don't understand why it continues. And no player, no matter how badly you've played, should you be subjected to that type of disgracefulness. And shame on these people. And this is a lot of why players limit their comments, limit who can comment on their stuff. Some people then say, oh, well, what's the point of having social media if we can't interact? Because there's a bunch of bozos out there that prevent all the good people from being able to do it. And until those bozos are prosecuted or banned from social media for life, this is going to carry on. So, you know, Kai Havertz had a bad game. Yeah. It happens in football. Let's not forget that Kai Havertz was probably one of our best players from January through May last season. Without him, I'm not quite sure what type of Arsenal team we would have been. Kai Havertz also last season did not start playing well until January. Everyone was starting to question it, 65 million down the drain, hence the song. You know, Arteta was playing him a lot in midfield, and yeah, he bought him to play as an 8, but he was showing that he had much more dominance playing in that 9 role. You know, we needed that physicality, some of the dark arts. Every team needs a dark artist. He's really good at that type of stuff. So I think that he's such a strong character that he'll bounce back. And it was a horror show for him yesterday, probably one of his worst games. But we love, I don't know about your team, we fans love to have a scapegoat, right? It was Xhaka for so many seasons. Then Always. It became Zinchenko, right? And now it's Kai Havertz. Martin Odegaard missed a penalty that could have won us the game. He's the captain. You know, let's be equal in our criticism. Forget abuse. I'm talking about critiquing a game and a player's performance, right? Martinelli, he scored a goal, it was offside. Probably one of his better games. You know, he was one that was really trying and working hard and whatever, but Marino stunk up the joint. Let's be equal in our criticism of these players. But right now, whether Kai Havertz scores a hat-trick against you, he will still get criticized, and there is still a fan base that is saying things that, you know, I just completely disagree with. And as a footballer, I think he's shown that he can overcome adversity. But right now, Kai Havertz is scapegoat number 1 at the Arsenal.
We've had a lot, Sophie, and at the moment, I think it's fair to say that players like Timo Werner are the scapegoat. But his performance yesterday at Tamworth was appalling. And even when I looked at the newspapers earlier, he got a 2 out of 10 rating from the Times newspaper, and the Times are normally pretty, you know, pretty fair. Some of the other newspapers gave him like 4 out of 10. It was a really poor performance, but I totally get what you mean. There are a lot of scapegoats at football clubs, certainly. You know, big clubs like Spurs and Arsenal, of course, there's always going to be. Who has impressed you? What players have really impressed you, and perhaps you've been a little bit surprised by this season?
The biggest surprise for me is I didn't have it on my bingo card that Miles Lewis-Skelly would emerge as a starter in the team before Nwaneri. I don't think a lot of Arsenal fans thought that would happen, but through injury, he's been given his opportunity. I wish that maybe when Odegaard was injured, Arteta put more faith in Nwaneri as well. I think we might be in a different position. But Miles Lewis-Skelly, I think, is the kind of the player that has impressed the most, given fans something to cheer about the most. He's so calm. He's got a little bit of dirty in him, just enough to not be that teenager that's intimidated by the opposition. He's composed. He's really good on the ball. I think he's got a lot to learn, of course, off the ball, sometimes positionally. He might find himself in a bit of a pickle, just the way Mikel wants that position to play, like that inverted role. But Miles Lewis-Skelly, for me, has been the highlight of the season so far.
When you said earlier about the dark arts, I would love to see Spurs players taking this approach and having the dark arts. Ange Postecoglou just is not interested in it, but we see this with so many teams, particularly that visit the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Time wasting, just that overall shithousery. Who's in your team that does it the most? Would you say?
We were really bad at it too, Chris, for so long. And Xhaka was the dark artist, but he was so bad at it, he just kept getting sent off, right? Benjamin White is the dark art king. And I can't tell you how much I've missed him playing in this first team. It's not talked about enough how much we miss Benjamin and that relationship on the right-hand side, what he does, pushing the ball forward. He's number one and he's brilliant at it. And you've seen, I don't need to tell you kind of the things that White has done. And Kai Havertz is some of the things he gets away with. Sometimes I'm like, how did the referee not see that? It's just brilliant. And we've really lacked that over the last few seasons, whether it's time wasting, whether it's in the box when the set pieces are coming, whether it's the referee turns and off the ball something happens, just enough to get away with it. Those two players are really, really good at it. Yeah, for sure.
Sophie, let's have a look at some player stats now. Top scorers this season, Spurs and Arsenal. James Maddison, 8 Premier League goals. Kai Havertz, 7. Brennan Johnson, 7. And assists, Saka, 10. HeungMin Son, 6. Kulusevski, 4. And tackles, Destiny Udogie, who of course won't be featuring at the Emirates on Wednesday, with 50. Thomas Partey with 49. And William Saliba with 40. Is that surprising for you, the goal scorer being James Maddison, 8, Havertz, 7? And I remember last time I spoke to you, you said that you needed a striker. But Arteta don't seem to think that's going to happen in this window.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been this kind of Maddison versus Odegaard argument with some Arsenal fans. Maddison, for me, is a player that, dives in and out of a season. He's going to go on this run, then he'll get injured, or then he'll lose form. I think you've seen it for yourself since he's joined Tottenham. Right now, he's going through a really good patch. Again, for Arsenal fans to look at that, Kai Havertz with 7 goals, he's the scapegoat. And good for Brennan Johnson, who was your scapegoat earlier this season and has kind of silenced some critics with the way he's played. I mean, the striker situation I understand in some ways, because last season, we scored the most goals in our Premier League history. The way Mikel Arteta likes to play, likes to get goals across the pitch, right? But I think with Mikel, he does something and it works as a formula and he beats it to death. And it goes back to me saying, what's his plan B? It's the same thing with eventually playing Thomas Partey at right back will hurt you. Even though he may have to play there, you've got to have a solution to that, right? He's a square peg round holes guy sometimes. And this season, when unfortunately some of our best players have found the wrong form at the same time, we haven't been able to come up with the answers, or they've been injured at the same time. So a striker, you would argue, some people think that Kai Havertz is on schedule to score 20 goals. And I'm sure there are people in live chat who are saying she's crazy, like stop beating the Kai Havertz drum. But really, what is it about Kai Havertz that riles everybody up so much, so badly? He's not a prolific goal scorer, right? And people will say, well, that's his position. Well, he's a versatile player, right? And he wasn't bought to play that out-and-out striker. He's not Harry Kane. He's not Haaland. He's not going to be that type of player. Mo Salah, it's amazing what he does and how many goals he scores on the flanks, right? I mean, it's crazy. He's just super talented. He's an elite world-class player. I think when Kai Havertz doesn't play well, it's so glaring. But I mean, I think Arsenal now need to dive into the market. and get a striker. But I don't think that's going to happen until the summer. So you can only beat that horse for some time, and you can't put all the pressure on one player like Kai, who's kind of, when he goes through bad patches, they're bad, you know. So Mikel Arteta needs to fix that. It's down to him, and it's down to the owners to not put the onus on one player. Same thing with Martin Odegaard. Who's going to step in if he's injured? If you're not trusting Waneri yet, you need to find a player that's going to be able to come in and deputise for him. I mean, the guy looks like completely beat.
Sophie, interesting what you said about James Maddison, because I feel like so many Spurs fans want to see him give more, including myself, because we know what he can do. We know what he can deliver. It's just having that consistency in the team and showing that real leadership on the pitch as well. Would it surprise you if I told you that one of the scapegoats this season has been HeungMin Son?
No. It wouldn't at all, because when I've seen you guys play, it feels like he's AWOL. He looks a shadow of the player he used to be. Is that fair or foul? Or is he doing something different?
I think some of it's fair. I'd put a lot of it down to, and I think a lot of people put it down to having an injury last year. All this travelling with South Korea, I think it would be beneficial if Son retired from international football. But I tell you what, I've been to South Korea, and Son is just... wow.
He's a god. He's a god there, isn't he?
It's incredible. He's on every packet of every packet of food. He's on billboards. He's advertising this, that, and the other. He's absolutely everywhere. So him retiring from international football and stopping all of these international trips, I think is a no-no. I don't think that's going to happen sometime soon. I think it's fair to say, and I think a lot of people have said it, that he's lost a yard of pace and he does seem a different player. If I was to ask you, and I've asked you this before, and I feel like every single time we have this conversation, I feel like as the years go on, you put less and less players into a combined 11, which may be fair, which may not. I don't know. I'll let the viewers and listeners make their minds up. But if we did a combined 11, how many Spurs players do you think would get in to the 11? Like what Spurs players would get into your team right now based on this season? Well,
Son always made my team, as you know, and Harry Kane, they always made my... Those were the two players I'd always say. And by the way, I know, you know, when a player like Son has delivered on the level he has for you guys, some players deserve a little bit of grace and respect. But unfortunately, football's an instant gratification world, and we don't live in it that way. It's a good question.
Is Son still getting in there?
No.
Or have you abandoned him?
I've abandoned him. I've just literally gone against everything I said. Yeah. And it's hard. Like Van der Ven is a really good player, but does he get ahead of Saliba and Gabriel? I don't think so.
He is absolute quality.
He is really good. Yeah, you've been missing him. Do you know who might get into the team now if it's just based on injuries? I would take Kulusevski because Saka's injured. I think he gets into this team because he would get into the team. Midfield, go on.
I was going to say, Sophie, that Kulusevski this season, it is like having a different player.
Yeah,
since the start of the season. Yeah, he's been incredible in every sense. Leadership, showing real leadership on the pitch. We didn't really see that from him last season, but of course, captain of Sweden now. Incredible player. I think he's going to get better as well.
Yeah, he's going to create some problems for us. But, you know, again, I think it's going to be interesting to see, you know, Miles Lewis-Skelly against him. Your midfield... I think I'll still take our midfield over yours.
I didn't expect any different, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I agree, but I didn't expect any different from you. That's fine.
Who would you? What does yours look like?
Well, do you know what? In all honesty, and to be honest and frank about it, Ange Postecoglou has changed the midfield so often. I think it was about 29 different midfield trios last season. Yes, we had a lot of injuries. Yes, we had a lot of suspensions, but the midfield, I feel like, is a real problem. And everyone is constantly saying that we need a number 6. And we thought that we were going to get a number 6 in during the summer transfer window. Of course, we bought Archie Gray from Leeds, 18 years old. And it's worth mentioning him because what a season he's had for us, playing at every single position apart from goalkeeper. He's been absolutely brilliant for a youngster to show real leadership on the pitch as well. He's been really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen much of him?
I have, and I think that he's a really good player, and I think he's got a really bright future ahead of him. And again, in a season that you're having, and is it Bergvall, the other young player?
Yeah, 18 as well. Yeah,
should have been sent off. Although there's something about those moments, like whatever. If you're a Tottenham fan, what a moment, right? To get the goal that he did. So yeah, he looks like a really talented player as well. Is he homegrown, Bergvall?
Bergvall, Sweden.
Sweden, right? Okay. Yeah, he looks good. He looks very good.
And you know what? Only 3 years ago, he had a couple of trials at Manchester United, but they didn't think he was good enough.
Wow. So what's your favoured 3 then?
I think that's very, very difficult because Maddison has been in and out of the team. Sarr, I like Bentancur, of course. He's had so many injury problems.
Is he okay now, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, he's okay. And he's now got to rest for 10 days or so. Basuma is not the player that everyone thought he was going to get from Brighton, because I say this so often on recent podcasts that Richarlison at Everton, we haven't seen that version, and Basuma at Brighton, we haven't seen that version. So to choose a midfield trio, I couldn't even answer that question, Sophie. I feel that it's really difficult because I don't think we've seen a trio giving top performances, overall, and I feel like that area needs to be looked at. But I know that all of us football fans always want more signings and we always want more, but I even think that Bergvall has done enough now to probably push James Maddison out of the team, because I feel like every single opportunity, and I always say this as well, when a young player comes into the team or a fringe player comes into the team, it is about grabbing that opportunity. And I tell you what, this season Jed Spence is a player that everyone thought was going to go out the door. Every single time he's had an opportunity this season, he's grabbed it. Bergvall exactly the same. Archie Gray has been brilliant, because there was talk about Archie Gray possibly going out on loan when we bought him, and he's been alongside Kulusevski, he's probably been our best player of the season. But yeah, transfer wise, we need to do more in January, and transfer wise in the summer we need to do more as well. So if I wanted to ask you about set pieces, what has changed? When did it change? Who has come in? Who is in charge of the set pieces? Because it's been incredible set pieces for you.
Yeah, the last few haven't, but yeah, Nicolaou, who was with Mikel at Manchester City, transformed everything when it comes to set pieces. When you look at the amount of goals Gabriel's been able to score, I don't think there's a central defender in Europe that scored more goals than Gabriel, even Van Dijk. They're inventive, they're strategic, and you can tell even in a game, Nicolaou, when there's a set piece, he kind of comes up in the space of Arteta and is the coach. I didn't like this set piece approach against Manchester United, if I'm being honest, in the game yesterday. It just felt like there was this new over kind of, it was like at the arch of Wembley, the delivery. And the delivery has been poor since we've missed Saka and since Declan Rice has started some games on the bench. But over the last 2 seasons, it's been incredible. And Nicolaou is completely responsible for that. You can see kind of how we set up. Some teams like Liverpool started that approach 3 or 4 games ago. And it has been a point of difference for us. But I think also, have we become a little bit too dependent on it? And when it doesn't work, what is the other option? Some people say it feels very George Graham, old school Arsenal. Well, I think those George Graham teams also played some really good football. But the 1-0 to the Arsenal approach, I understand why some fans think that way. But when we haven't been able to convert set pieces of late, we haven't found answers creatively. So it's been a blessing and a curse only in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 weeks. But he's done an amazing job, and it has really changed, I think, at least 4, 5, 6 important results over the last season or so.
So if we've got a number of facts and stats here that I'd like you to react to.
Not XG.
Arsenal. I'm not going down that route. No.
Okay. All right. Good.
Arsenal have won 6 of their last 8 Premier League games against Spurs, drawing 1, losing 1, and are looking to win 3 consecutive league games against them for the first time since January 1989. How would you describe the last 8 Premier League games between Spurs and Arsenal?
I mean, some have been joyous for us, mostly been joyous for us. The Gabriel header, where Saka was getting a lot of abuse before his delivery, that was last season. Kai Havertz header. I think, for us...
Can I just say on that abuse, and we spoke about abuse earlier, and Brennan Johnson was actually one of those players that deactivated his Instagram because of the amount of abuse he got. But do you remember after the Euros, Saka got a lot of abuse?
Yeah.
Arsenal come to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to play a friendly, and I know it's a ridiculous thing, Arsenal playing Spurs in a friendly at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but most of the Spurs home fans applauded Saka, which I thought was a really, really lovely moment. Yeah,
no, and he got that at most stadiums he went to, which was lovely. And let's be honest, Arsenal fans do it to Tottenham players that are going to take a corner. We're not. So yeah, I mean, I think they've been in our favour. I believe there's some games that you've played well in, given us problems in. But overall, I think that we've been the better team. There was the game at the Emirates where I got really worried, where we went 3-0 up at halftime. Do you remember that one? And you came back in the second half. It was 3-2. You nearly scored, but for that Aaron Ramsdale tip over the bar. I think it was Harry Kane. Was it Harry Kane header? That was a bit squeaky bum time, but I think the rivalry's still there. We don't like each other. We desperately want to win this game. There's nothing more than you'd love to turn us over at ours. We're vulnerable right now. Newcastle have done it. Manchester United have done it. Angie's probably drumming that into your players. They're a little bit on their knees right now. The confidence has gone. Let's just play our game. And the problem is, for Arsenal, you can play your game, score goals. We could score goals. But I think if there's a time to try and get a result against us, it's now.
Can I just ask you about Saka, because he's going to be out for a little while? It's going to probably be a ridiculous and obvious question, but how much are you going to miss him?
I mean, it just gets worse as time goes by, right? It's kind of like what I was talking about with Mikel finds solutions to problems, and then he just wants to hone in on those. And, he squeezed a lot of juice out of these starting 11 players. I would say England too have maybe played Saka when he didn't really need to play. It's not just on Mikel Arteta, but he's been very durable, and he's such a special player. I mean, what would Liverpool look like without Mo Salah? I'm not saying Saka's better than Mo Salah, Chris. I'm just talking about quality in each team, right? I mean, you've experienced... For me, Van der Ven was one of the signings of the season, and you lose him, you lose a lot of the heartbeat of what you do that is good, which allows you to really play your strategy in that high line in some ways, right? Because of his speed and how he plays football. So for us, it's really a kick in the stomach, and to lose a player like him, it's very tough to replace. And unfortunately, we didn't do enough in the transfer market to bring someone in to make that happen. And we let players go as well, like Reece Nelson and Mill Smith-Rowe. And now Nwaneri's injured. So we've got problems.
So for the next one, Tottenham have won just 1 of their past 31 Premier League away games against Arsenal, drawing 12 and losing 18, and then winless in 13 since a 3-2 victory in November 2010. Do you remember that November 2010 game? I won't focus on the other bit.
Is it at the 2010 game at ours?
Yeah, you were 2-0 up and we won 3-2. Eunice Cabal.
Yeah, no. That's the header, right? The Cabal header, which is highly annoying. And thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
You got to let me talk about the one win.
Sure. Why not? Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah. See, those I tend to put out of my head. I try to forget them.
Yeah.
But then when you mentioned his name, of course, I could see the goal happening right now. It was a very good header, by the way. Great delivery as well.
What does the North London derby mean to you? And when do you start feeling, the feelings that all of us get? The nerves, the excitement, the worry?
It's the one game you never want to lose. And it's the one game where you will accept a draw because losing is so painful. It's so painful losing a North London derby. Yeah. And it's what you have to deal with afterwards, because I think we all have family members. My brother's a Tottenham fan. I think I may have said this to you before. My dad's a Man United fan. My sister's a Man United fan. My brother's a Tottenham fan, and I'm an Arsenal fan. And it gets, testy. My first cousins, half of them are Tottenham fans, half of us are Arsenal fans. So you never, ever want to lose this game because your WhatsApp goes on fire and the banter kicks in. And even though you would be doing it as well, you can't take it. Let's be honest. It's really difficult to take. Yeah. But I do love the fixture. I believe it is the best London. I believe it's the best derby in the Premier League. I truly believe Liverpool and Man United have a good rivalry. Liverpool, the Merseyside derby's dead. The Manchester's derby has not been particularly exciting. The last one, maybe the most recent one with the Ahmad goal, was a pretty exciting finish. And but I think it's still the best derby that delivers the best football, the most drama. And for me, I'm nervous about it from the minute I check the schedule at the start of the season. Then I forget about it for a little bit. And then when we start doing shows like this, all I can think of is just please don't lose the game. Please don't lose the game. Even when we're really good. Because like I said, you never know what's going to happen. So I love it.
Sophie, Arsenal are unbeaten in their last 12 Premier League home games, winning 9 and drawing 3, and are the only side without a home loss so far this season, winning 6, drawing 3. They've kept a clean sheet in each of their last 4 home league games. That must fill you with a bit of confidence.
Arteta out. Listen to these.
Hopefully I've just jinxed it by giving you all those stats.
It's amazing, isn't it? I didn't want to hear your stats, but now I'm just like, keep rolling them off. It's amazing when you hear those stats and you think to yourself, well, what's the problem with some Arsenal fans? Why do they want Arteta out? A little bit like you guys, it's the style of football. You didn't like the style of football under Mourinho or Nuno, like we said. And that's the problem. So you can't lose this game. I know I say this every time the North London derby comes up. But this particular North London derby, other than maybe his first, and the challenge, the ones, I think one of my favourite North London derbies over the last 3 or 4 years was the one at yours, where we played brilliantly. The Ramsdale incident with the fan, that had like everything. That was pure fire, that game. That was important because we were challenging for a title, right? I think this is Mikel Arteta's most important North London derby, because I think you would, even though you weren't playing the best football, I still think you were a good team, and those were tough games. I think everyone expects Arsenal to be beating Tottenham because you're vulnerable, but I see this as Mikel's most important North London derby. He cannot lose this game. I don't even think a draw is going to satisfy some fans.
Sophie, interesting in how you brought up Aaron Ramsdale there, of course, moved to Southampton. What did you make of that move? And also, I remember seeing the clip on Sky Sports from your very podcast, because you had his dad on saying about he was unhappy not to get the game time. And what have you made of David Raya?
That was a real crazy day, by the way, Chris.
I bet.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Aaron. I think he came to the club at a time where we were a little bit on our knees, player culture wise. That year we signed White, Tomiyasu, Ramsdale. We had Emil Smith-Rowe and Saka kind of holding the fort and keeping fans in love with the club. He helped transform our culture, was part of the team that got us back into the Champions League. May have been a little bit unlucky in, losing his space. But when you see how David Raya has come in and performed, and last season, he was brilliant. The clean sheets show it. You can't really argue with the decision that Mikel Arteta made. I would love for him to have stayed at the club and still be here, but football just doesn't work that way. David Raya started off great this season. He's gone a bit off the boil this in the last 2 or 3 months, 2 months. But I still think he's the right goalkeeper. I don't know if Aaron chose the right team to go to, but at the same time, when you want to play, there's rumours brewing about Newcastle again, and actually that's where we thought he was going. So it's a shame that, he's in a relegation fight again, but that doesn't diminish that he's still a good goalkeeper, and I hope that he keeps his confidence up and ends up at a team where he's going to be able to enjoy like a Premier League career. He comes from a wonderful family. They're an amazing group of people, and I always wish him the best.
Just very quickly on Southampton, do you think that's one of the worst Premier League teams we've seen in the league?
I think they're worse than Derby, aren't they, Chris?
Bad.
That Derby team was bad, but they're bad. I mean, they're bad. Look, I know that you guys can turn it on a whim the way you play football, but I think you went easy on them. I think it could have been 10-0 at half time. Yeah,
foot off the gas, yeah. Totally agree.
I think it was one of those NFL moments where you're putting a 50 burger on a team and the coach says, go easy. Yeah.
I remember at half time at St Mary's, so many fans come up to me and said, "What's our record scoreline in the Premier League?" And everyone's like, "We could score 10, we could score 12." And it was like, no, we completely, calmed it down.
Yeah.
Sophie, next one. Tottenham have won just one of their last 8 Premier League matches, drawing 2 and losing 5, with that victory coming against Southampton, as we've just spoken about. Since the start of this run, only Leicester 4 and Southampton 1 have earned fewer points in the Premier League than Spurs 5. What do you make of that?
Oh, that's surprising. I mean, I knew it was bad. I don't know everything about your team. It's like when someone in the comments said, about Bergvall when I asked if he was homegrown. Homegrown players can also be foreign players, right? Yeah. Saliba's a homegrown player. I'm surprised it's comparable to those two teams, if I'm being honest, Chris. That's pretty bad.
Do you get the criticism for Ange Postecoglou? Because, of course, we've already spoken about how harsh social media can be. There has also been a lot of abuse to Ange Postecoglou himself. I was away at the away game in Bournemouth, some weeks ago, and there were a lot of fans, having that confrontation with Ange Postecoglou. Are you surprised on how much criticism has been aimed at him, particularly when Spurs have gone down the route of replacing managers pretty much every 18 months? When I talk about managers, we've had 7 different managers, from Pochettino being sacked in 2019 up until Postecoglou now in 2025. We've had 7 different managers in the dugout.
Wow. At some point, you've got to stick with a formula, right? At some point, you've got to give someone the opportunity to build something. Spurs fans wanted sexy football. Well, you got sexy football. What you want is a little bit of discipline defensively to go with that sexy football. And I do think if he just was a little bit conservative in moments, I actually think this could be a really good Tottenham team. You've got talented players. You can score goals, like with players like Kulusevski and with Son, you could get goals out of nothing. Maddison has the ability to do that as well. I think Van der Ven, like I said, is one of the best signings any club has made. I I would have, if I'm going to pick a player that I would love in the team, if there was no Saliba and Gabriel, I would still love him in my team. He's such a good player, and he's been injured, unfortunately. But if your club invests in him, gives him the money to build on the team, and if he could just be adaptable, I think maybe you've got your guy. The problem is it's been a bit too gung-ho. You've suffered from terrible injuries. There've been no answers to replacing players that you've lost because the level just goes down too much. And it's been a really tough situation. I think I win a cup in my second year. I fear that might come. There's something about his confidence, Chris, that you would have thought that Mourinho or Conte could have delivered that. I mean, the club making a decision to remove Mourinho a week before a League Cup final, maybe that was the moment. But where you least expect it, sometimes it happens. And if there's anything you've got to give this guy, it's his belief and his confidence in himself. He just doesn't have that from his players and some of the fan base right now. But if it could all come together, I think, why not? But I don't think this is the team in his image yet. I don't think he's built his Tottenham. People want to give Mikel Arteta grace. He was given a lot of money and he built Arsenal 2.0 and he was given time to do it. Will you have the patience to do that with Ange? Time will tell.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that a lot of fans need to give the manager the patience. I know they've been frustrated at a lot of decisions in the past at board level, and sacking people like Jose Mourinho and Pochettino. I thought that he had more than enough credit in the bank to keep his job. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He does need a bit of time and patience. So for this next stat here, what an interesting one this is. Arsenal have conceded a league high 28% of their Premier League goals in the opening 15 minutes of games this season, 5 out of the 18. Meanwhile, Tottenham have scored more goals in this time period, more than any other side, 11.
Now, what I love about this, and I read about this the other day. I love this stat, by the way, because talk about a combustible situation. I predicted on our show yesterday or the day before that you would probably score first. No doubt about it. There's something about, what's really weird now is as well, they play that song. I'm not a fan of the North London Forever song. Sorry, Arsenal fans. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I don't. I certainly don't love the way they've moved it to when kickoff happens and it's still playing and ringing in players' ears. I'm not saying that's why we concede by any stretch, but we're just talking about the start of the game. It's the song.
Another excuse.
It's the white kit. It's the song. It's the ball.
Another excuse, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're very vulnerable. We're not been able to settle in. And one of the things we've been able to do over the last 2 seasons is bounce back. And we found it difficult to bounce back. So can't afford to go a goal down, but I think you will score first. It'll be difficult for us, but you're vulnerable at the back. So probably be goal fest on Wednesday.
Goal galore, yeah. I'm going to probably go 2-2 or 3-3, but we'll come to that in a second. As a team, Tottenham have applied more pressures in the final third than any other side in the Premier League this season, 1,321. Striker Dominic Solanke leads the way for this among players with his 386, over 100 more than the next highest, which is Erling Haaland, 275. Now, I know that strikers are very often looked at to get as many goals as possible, judged on goals. But Dominic Solanke, I've got to say, Sophie, I think I've been very, very impressed with his pressing, his work rate, running on and off the ball, his hold-up play. What have you made of Solanke? Because when you talk about strikers and the need for Arsenal to have a striker, would you like to see someone like Dominic Solanke in your team? And do you think he would get in your combined 11?
Do you think that for some of your fans, Solanke's our Havertz?
I haven't seen any.
I'm talking about like they don't rate him. Maybe that they think maybe he costs a little bit too much. Are you getting ROI, bang for your buck?
I think in this world we live in now, it's all just about numbers. It's all analysis constantly. And the biggest thing for a striker is how many goals have they scored? But I don't think people see the bigger picture of the work that he does for the team. Let me show you this video. This is his hold-up play for Bergval's goal for Spurs, obviously, in the League Cup semi-final first leg.
Yeah, that goal doesn't happen without Solanke's play. And he's been very good at doing that. He didn't start off flying when he first signed, but he found his feet in this team. And I think your manager's given him every confidence. He's really said, you're my guy, you're my signing, I wanted you. And that makes a huge difference for a player. And he played out of that funk because he had that kind of confident coach behind him. And he's very good off the ball, Solanke. I'll give him that as well. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he does off the ball too, because you've got dangerous players on your flanks where he opens up spaces for them. And I don't think he gets enough credit for, because not a lot of people will see, Solanke's the danger man. Once Kulusevski gets the ball, you get the ball into him, get the ball into Son. Your midfield bursting through. You want Solanke to be that number 9 in the right place at the right time. But I think he's a good player on and off the ball. I think he's been a good signing for you. I just was really curious to see, because he's not flashy, like everyone wants the flash. If some of your fans kind of saw him a little bit negatively.
Postecoglou just doesn't do flash though, Sophie, and it's interesting because I don't care where the goals come from, and from what Anne just said before, he doesn't care where the goals come from, and he likes to see the goals spread out. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with an Arsenal fan a week or so ago, and they were saying, we only score from set pieces, and I said, does it matter where the goals come from or how you score the goals? As long as you're scoring the goals, that's all that should matter, right?
Yeah, exactly. Last season we were the only club, I think, across Europe that had 4 players on double digits for goals and assists. And Arteta's the same way. This is why Arsenal fans screaming for a striker, might not get one definitely in this window, is because he wants the goals spread about. Last season, you had Saka scoring, Odegaard scoring, Havertz scoring. You had Trossard, who was probably our most clinical finisher last season, gone off the boil. And everyone's lost their form at the same time. And we're not seeing that creativity, the way Mikel likes to play this possession-based, patient football. It has not yielded the same results. And I think if you just let the players play their game, bring the speed back, let that creativity flow at the cost of controlling games, I think we've gone from playing fearless football to fearful football. And that's been the difference for us this season. And teams are starting to take advantage of that.
So if you last stats, each of Kai Havertz's last 11 Premier League goals have been scored in London, and no player has provided more assists following a ball carry in the Premier League this season than Tottenham captain HeungMin Son, which is 5, and his next assist will make him the outright assist leader for Spurs in Premier League history, currently 68, level with Darren Anderton.
I did not know that.
So let's hope he breaks that record at the Emirates. Wouldn't that be nice?
We've already spoken breaking it at the Emirates.
Oh yes, yeah. We've already spoken about Havertz, but attacking wise, who are the real threats? This is the last question for you before we get your score prediction. Who are the real threats that we should worry about on Wednesday night in an Arsenal shirt?
I think Martinelli's always going to create a problem speed wise. The question with Martinelli is he going to release the ball at the right time? Is he going to look up at the right time and make the right pass? He's gotten a bit better than that. He was not in good form earlier on this season, probably one of our better players against United. Martin Odegaard can always be a threat, and he needs to kind of play out of his injury, play back into form. But again, Martin Odegaard, you can never underestimate what he can do with the ball. He's a very special player. Just, gone off the boil since the injury, but I still believe in Martin Odegaard. I think he's one of the best midfielders in the league. Jesus is injured now. He was in form. I can't sit here and say Kai Havertz because I haven't seen it yet, but, if anyone can overcome adversity, maybe Kai. But in terms of danger right now, Declan Rice came on against Manchester United and looked like one of our better attackers, which is crazy. So I would say Declan Rice's set pieces could cause you a problem. Martin Odegaard breaking out of pockets and finding spaces where no one thinks it's possible. And Martinelli's speed that could create chances in open play.
Sophie, I've got to ask you, because of course you're based in America. Pochettino is now the coach of USA. What do you make of that appointment? Is everyone excited over there?
Oh yeah, very excited. I've been on a few press conferences with Poch.
Have you?
Actually, yeah. I actually, if you ever want me to sneak in a Tottenham question for you one day, just let me know.
Oh yes. I'll be in contact.
I covered Tottenham on their tour to the US maybe 4 or 5 seasons ago. You were here, Chris, with Pochettino. I remember meeting Ledley King. They were training at LA Galaxy, where I go to all the time. And
I was there.
You were there, but we didn't know each other at that time, did we?
No.
And I liked meeting him. He's awesome in the press conferences. He's really passionate about this job. He and Emma Hayes have created a really close relationship, because I've spoken to Emma Hayes quite a few times since she's become US women's national team. They go to each other's houses. They travel to each other. She's helped him really kind of get into American culture and American life. And he seems to be really enjoying it. He's so excited about the 2026 World Cup and what that could bring. And in fact, there's a camp happening. I think there might be a press conference happening next week or whatever. I'll check and I'll let you know. And we'll try and throw in a Tottenham question there for you. But yeah, I mean, I don't care what Arsenal fans say. I've always liked Poch. He's a very, very nice man. He's good with the media, and he's always super polite when you meet him in person or you talk to him over even a Zoom on a press conference as well. So yeah, he's enjoying life here in the United States.
Yeah. So if I don't know whether you've been reading some of the comments, there's lovely comments about you actually. One of them from Ian here says she's a Spurs fan because you're so nice and you're so balanced about Tottenham, which I really, really appreciate, and that's why we keep bringing you back every single time that we face Arsenal. So you've been such a great guest. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, I always appreciate being invited back, and as much as I want to see Spurs lose, I always enjoy our conversations, because one of the beautiful things about football is you can have really engaging conversations. You don't have to be yelling and you don't have to be spiteful. But I will thoroughly enjoy our victory on Wednesday night. How about that?
One of the other comments, Sophie said, I prefer Sophie to Lee coming on.
You know why? Because Judges is going to give you some of my family members, the Tottenham fans. You know, I always had a soft spot in it. Yeah, do you know what I mean? That's Lee, right? But if you watch his videos, he's vicious when it comes to talking about Spurs. But no, bless him. He's a good mate. I love Lee.
So if I could honestly talk to you for hours about Tottenham, Arsenal, football in general, thank you so much. And lastly, tell everyone where they can find you on social media, what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, give us a follow at Highbury Squad. We did a post-game show yesterday Arsenal fans are avoiding, which I totally understand. You know, on tomorrow's show, I'm really excited about it. We've got David Ornstein on the show tomorrow, which is going to be really cool. So tune in. 6:45 p.m. That'll be a really good one. So check us out, and thank you, Chris, as always, for the opportunity to chat football with you.
Sophie, thank you so much. We look forward to speaking to you again soon, and you're almost turned into a channel regular here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and of course we'll be back with another edition of the Spurs Chat podcast very soon. Stay safe, stay well, and come on, you Spurs.